Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams and I am alone today. Corey's out doing some traveling with his family, and today is a really special episode today because we actually have guests on from our episode 209. Now, they didn't come in on episode 209. On episode 209, we talked about the article that was written about them in the Wall Street Journal. And they ended up getting back in communication with us, letting us know that the advice we gave on that podcast turned out to be more relevant and effective given what their aims were for the future than the very planner that they were connected with the Wall Street Journal. And so I hope you guys enjoy this. This is Jennifer and Kevin Boskin. They are sharing some intimate details about their life, all for the sake of getting good advice for their family, with a willingness to share and be vulnerable to bring that value to all of you. So I hope you enjoy this, and we look forward to seeing you on the other side. Well, right from episode 209 of our podcast and the pages of the Wall Street Journal, I have with us Kevin and Jennifer Boskin. So glad you guys could join us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, you guys, how did this come about initially? Like, well, I guess I've already shared with the audience. You guys reached. You didn't reach out to us. I had sent you a little LinkedIn note letting you know we had put you in the podcast. But I'm super curious, what we didn't get a chance to talk about. How did you ever get connected with the Wall Street Journal article?
Well, I just sent them an email. I mean, we read the Wall Street Journal, and there's sections in there where they talk about financial advice, and they had the Game Changers article that we were in, but then they also have another one where they do, a yes or no, and people give their advice if you should do it or you should not do it, and that's what we were kind of hoping to be in. So when I sent out the information to the Wall Street Journal, I said, hey, this is the idea we have about our vacation home. Do we build one? Do we build two? Do we do it now? Do we do it later? Kind of take it with it and play with the story. And then they just connected us with Lisa, and we got into the Game Changers one.
Okay, right on. And so you kind of went through that. How long ago, just to give people a sense of the timeline, how long ago did you guys interview for that article? And then when it was published, and then of course here we are now, right near the end of February, which is a very special day. I don't know why it's special, but it is February 22nd, 2022, which looks really cool when I write it down on a piece of paper. So I want to go sign some stuff today.
There's probably a lot of people getting married today. So.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good thing.
I guess when did we reach out, Kevin? I think around June or July of 2021.
Yeah, I think that's when you sent the email to Lisa. And then we probably interviewed with her over the course of like a month or two. They published in September. And so, yeah, it's been about, 6 or 8 months since we kicked this off with them.
Right on. And while kind of their overarching advice in the article kind of lent itself toward, you should save up a lot more money and do more traditional financial vehicles before doing this buying of the vacation property. And one thing you guys probably heard when you heard the episode where we talked about your article, Corey said, I bet you they're moving forward with this regardless of what the advice is.
Yeah.
And
no.
and so what because of the way the advice was given was not at all about your property, but a lot about traditional financial products. And Corey's like, I think they're going to build it.
Yeah, Corey's right.
Yeah, so you guys are moving ahead with it. How does that project stand now, say, versus September when you talked to them?
So when we got the advice from the Wall Street Journal, I had a feeling we were going to get that type of like boilerplate financial advice. After like reading that specific column, it's really geared towards, sometimes people that don't always make the best like financial decisions, but I also felt like we were somewhat prepared to move forward with this. There was obviously risk involved, but it wasn't the type of investment that would, greatly like impede our future financial success. So where we are now is we're planning on interviewing builders over this summer with the hopes of starting construction next spring. We've
on.
determined like what we need to save between now and then so that we can get the 25% down payment, take out a construction loan. And then given where we are now in our current mortgage, we feel that amount of debt load will be reasonable given our incomes and current assets.
Yep. Well, and I think you're well informed both to move forward with the real estate, not just sort of default back to the traditional financial product situation. But I think what's also super smart that is uncommon, and I don't know if it's uncommon in the group of people that you're around, but it's not like we see every single day that people are just chunking away, saving a significant portion of their income. Because have you guys done the math on what percentage you save of your gross household income?
Yeah, we actually calculated that out when we were interviewing for the article for the Wall Street Journal, and it's about, I would say this was about 6 months ago, we calculated it to be 35%. And that's, we took our that's just our annual savings rate. So.
And that includes the cash you save plus what you put in the 401k accounts, all that.
Correct. All of that. And that's just the extra cash we have. And then it doesn't, have anything about what our employer puts into our 401k or anything. It's just like our money.
Perfect. And that right there, just setting aside 34% of your income, regardless of the amount of income being made, is rare. I don't know does that feel like it's rare given the people that you surround yourself with, or is it not something that comes up? I'm just curious.
Well, I think I was just gonna say, I think we're minimalists. We're savers, so we don't spend lavishly. But where we do spend, it's on things like this. It's in a second property, where we can get rental income, and when we have kids in the future, we can spend vacations at this property. So we choose our investments wisely.
That's great.
Yeah, less on clothes and shoes and more on experiences and long-term investments.
Right on. Well, let me, if I may, one thing that thank you for the note that you sent me, Jennifer. Not only did I feel great that you guys mentioned that our podcast was super helpful to you, which it wasn't necessarily our intention that we thought it'd be helpful to the two of you, but man, am I thankful it was. I was just hopeful it was, helpful to all the people reading that article who it'd be very easy to read that and go, I guess I shouldn't build a piece of real estate. I mean, heck, they're saying those people shouldn't build a piece of real estate when they have next to no mortgage, when they have a lot of extra money set aside, when they're really financially responsible. They're telling those people, don't go develop your own property. Well, I definitely shouldn't. So that's what I was hoping I'd reach, and I'm just super thankful it reached the two of you. What I'm thinking we should do is talk a little bit about the financing bit. How do you go about financing this property? Do you take any out of your home? All of that good stuff. Does that sound like be a good use? And we'll kind of sketch that out today. And then hopefully some point in the future, we'll have you guys back and we can discuss some different concepts, etc. No obligation or anything on your guys' part, just fun content for the world as long as it's fun for you guys.
That would be super helpful. I would say, and Jen, let me know if you agree, but that's like the biggest questions we have. Do we do a cash out refinance? Do we do a construction loan? I'm sure there's other alternatives, but that's the piece we can't really figure out at this point.
Yeah, and that we don't have obviously any experience with it or know people who have experience. So, sometimes you need help guiding in the right direction before you make a mistake.
So as you guys are considering, should we do a cash out refi? Should we refinance our primary residence? Where's the best place to get money? All of that. It probably helps if we go back to a more 30,000 foot view on just how is it banks make money. Okay. Now, I think everybody's generally familiar with this. We'll look at today's rates of interest. Let's say you can get 0.5% on $100,000 if you deposit it at a bank, right? So the bank has to send away from them 0.5% on $100,000 to keep that money deposited. So far, so good? Okay.
Yeah.
And then when a bank lends money, do they lend it from their coffers or do they lend other people's money?
Is that a question? They lend other people's money.
You got it. Yes. Now, the funny thing is it almost, until you articulate that way, almost feels like they're lending their money until somebody asks a question, and then you have to pause and go, oh yeah, I guess you're right. So then let's say that they can turn that around, and just for the sake of conversation, they can put it out on the street at 3.5%. So now they have money coming in on that 100,000 at 3.5%. Now, not to put you guys on the spot, so I won't. But what many people do is look at what we just did here and say, see, the bank's making 3% return. They must have to do a ton of these to be able to pay their bills and build all these buildings and have all these employees, making 3% on every transaction. Because that's just how it feels. It's the difference between 0.5% and 1%. But that's not the full story of how banks are making money in this instance. They're sending out $500 a year to keep the $500,000. That is their cost. And what they have coming back in is $3,500. Now that's a $3,000 return on a $500 investment. That is not 3%, but 600%. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is the concept of net interest income for banks.
Yep. That because they're not lending it on their money, they're lending it on using your money. Mm-hmm. So far, so good?
Yep.
Okay. So now let's take that. I'm going to take a little bit of extreme degree of an example here, but I think it'll work. So let's say you have $100,000 and it's your $100,000. What is the cost for you to put $100,000 into the new home? It's full 100, right? Because you guys, it's all your money, right? It doesn't end up being like the bank's money, anybody else's money. It's only your money that's going in to the deal. And so it's all your return at 3%. Or whatever return you get on the property, yeah? So just one-time use of money, that's it. And that's not bad. It's just a one-time use of money. But now, if we jump back, and now let's look at what happens here. If you get, say, 6% return on this property. Now, the reason I'm going to use 6 is it's something that's slightly higher than the interest rate that you'd pay. Obviously, you would not want to go through the trouble you're going through of buying and building and developing this property if all you were going to get was 6. But we're going to use 6 for now. So if you get 6% and it's your money, you make $6,000. And that's it, one-time turn on your money. But if you do what the banks do, and let's say that this $100,000 is not your money. This $100,000 is money that you borrow. Now, for now, we can leave off whether you refinance your first mortgage, etc., or just get a home equity line of credit that produces this extra 100. But that $100,000, you're going to pay to use. So you don't just make the 6%. You're going to pay, let's say, 3.5% for that money, which is going to cost you $3,500. That $3,500 is going to earn you, even at the same return that we just did above, 6%, and that's going to be $6,000. Now, do either of you have just a simple calculator there?
It's 25. Are you just talking about the difference?
Yep, the 2,500, and then divide that by the 3,500, because that's our cost. This is by the way, nothing fancy here. Anybody who's watching that's ever run a profit and loss statement, this is exactly how you check the profit and loss of any business. You just have what are our costs and what did we make. It just kind of gets blown up and seems more complicated because it's financial.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you get when you divided 2,500 by 3,500?
71%.
71%. So each time we could be on that side of the ledger we'd want to be, because that's our money now earning a higher rate of return than it would have been otherwise. Now, last but not least, what this doesn't account for is in this scenario here, where we borrowed the money, this version of you in our hypothetical future also has the $100,000 you guys are working on saving up right now, right? So now this person has $100,000 of cash or investments on the sidelines that they can get to whenever they want it, which allows them to either do another project, have more emergency funds, have additional cash left over to furnish the vacation side of the property, or furnish your side for that matter.
Yeah, and that's the question we always have, right? Is you're going to have that cash on the sidelines, so what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it in the market. You can get higher returns if it's a good market, right? Other than that, we don't have any use for the cash, and that's why we were proposing putting so much down, because then you can avoid that much interest on the 100,000, the 3.5%.
Totally agree, but that's the key, is that all we're avoiding is 3.5% in cost.
Yeah, so if the market's earning 10%, it's better to pay that 3.5, earn the 10%, and your net is the 6.5%. Totally get that. I'd say we're probably more risk averse, and I feel like we already have a decent amount in the market. And then once we make these, these big lump sum payments, that's when we'll start stepping up our contributions to 401ks.
I'm so glad you said that.
Stuff like that.
Yep. Because what I would say is that what I hear there, Kevin, is there's almost like a collapse between specific investment risk and systemic risk. And this will just be something for you guys to be able to reflect on, think about, try it on, see if it works for you. Is that, yes, there might be more risk that we have some money in the market and some money paid down on a mortgage, if you're just comparing those two things. But the real risk comes when we have a job loss or an economic downturn and we're partway through that real estate project and now we're nervous and we're not making the best decisions we can. And if we have 100,000 on the sidelines, that's a little less. The risk is going through a weird time. I mean, heck, we just went through a very weird 2-year time, but where maybe people don't do Airbnb or don't want to rent vacation rentals for whatever reason. And having $100,000 on the sidelines makes sense that. And last but not least, it's just thinking through. And if you do the math on the two, of if I keep $100,000 invested versus having a very, very small additional loan, $100,000 against a property that's going to be worth, say, $500,000, you think at least when it's built, it would be worth what you paid for it, and maybe much more. We hope much more. And yet,
and we completely agree, and that's why another one of our goals is building up our emergency reserves. So, like you just said, job loss or unforeseen circumstances, to cause us to overspend in a certain area. That's why we're thinking, we'd like to carry at least 80,000 probably in emergency reserves. I think we'll be at that level by the time we make this investment, because if we lump this into that emergency reserve, we're now talking 180, and to me that's just too much to carry. That's an unnecessary amount. We don't work in fields where we may be out of work for years at a time. I feel like we could, move into another job if something ever came up.
Totally.
Jobs.
Totally.
But no, I hear what you're saying, and I totally get the concept of the net interest income here. It makes complete sense. You're boosting your return, but we know that also by paying down the $100,000 on the down payment, that's a guaranteed 3.5% that you're making because you're avoiding that interest. Versus in the market and elsewhere, it's not guaranteed. Now, historical returns, yeah, we're probably going to make like 10% on average. But if it's like a year or two, we don't feel like that's going to set us back too much.
And this is the part where I would offer that be worth assessing. Have you guys ever seen that example where somebody makes a little IRA contribution for like the first 10 years of their career from when they're 20 to 30, and then they stop? And then the other person in the article from ages 31 to 65 for 35 years funds their IRA every single year. And
it's benefiting the first person from
you got it. You got it. So this is what I would just throw out to you guys to try on and maybe model before we talk again. Would just be what happens if you leave that $100,000 and you pay down the mortgage, and it'll give you that extra $3,500, if you will, of cash flow each year, because $3,500 is the approximate cost of money for $100,000, and that'll take some amount of years till you've gotten the extra $3,500 a month of cash flow, versus if you just took a home equity line of credit from your house and then kept all of that money invested. I'm not saying super aggressive, just put it in the spreadsheet at like 7. And what I would throw out to you that I think you'll notice when you do that is that the investment money preserves the real estate investments. Now, I went through 2008 in a bad way in Las Vegas. Like, I watched people lose everything. And yet, even in the hardest hit real estate market in the entire country, which was Las Vegas, those people would have still made money on their horrible real estate investments if they didn't have to sell them. Today, they would have had a significant positive outcome to those real estate investments, even made back in 2007. But they had to sell them. And so the thing that I've thrown out to real estate investors, both those that teach other people how to professionally real estate invest and professional real estate investors, was this. If what we can do is move through time, continue to do real estate investing, but just paying attention that are not our 401k stuff, but our stuff outside 401ks, which we refer to generally as non-qualified, that non-qualified investments, if those are half of our investment mortgages, we're going to be just fine, no matter what the market throws at us. We'll just have enough money set aside that we can weather any of the stuff going on, and it's the exact same kind of investments we got to keep in our 401k anyway, so we're going to have them. And just think of it, I heard the guy in the Wall Street Journal article say something effective, you should have the same amount of investments as real estate values, but that didn't make sense to me because that's more of an asset allocation decision. What I want is a risk aversion decision, which is the ability to access capital, which includes your emergency fund for sure. So you have your emergency fund for part of it. Once you have enough non-qualified assets, maybe as much doesn't have to stay in the pure emergency fund. Maybe I only have to keep 40 in the emergency fund, and I put the other 40 on top of the 400,000 in my investment portfolio, because I'm not as worried about needing to access the entire 80 when I have 400 I could access. So I would just throw that out to you guys as a little bit of an experiment or something to put into a spreadsheet before we talk at some point in the future here. And this idea of, at least at a minimum, if I may ask, have you guys just opened a home equity line of credit so it's available to you?
No, we haven't done anything like that.
That would be a great first thing to do, like this week, because it also supplements if an emergency, quote unquote, occurred. Banks don't want to lend you money after the emergency occurs. They want to approve you of borrowing the money when everybody's fully employed, when everything's going good, when nobody's recently changed jobs, all of that good stuff. And so you secure the home equity line of credit when you have a lot of equity like you guys do in your home, and you just get like a $150,000 home equity line of credit. You do it with a local credit union. They probably will not charge you a thing. They'll just give you a checkbook you can drop in your file cabinet or your safe, and then should anything unforeseen happen, you have access to it. And in many cases, it may even improve credit scores for when you go for the other stuff, because it appears you have a lot of credit that is unused. So
yeah, I hadn't even considered doing anything like that. I didn't really know you could do something like that. So
yeah, and most little credit unions or even big banks, they love how secure that is on their books, as a place that they can collect interest from. So many times they'll charge little to nothing for you to be able to get it. So you just keep it on their books and it'll be 3.5%, 4%. It won't be much, and you can access 70, 80% of your home equity just in case something happens, or just in case another huge opportunity comes along over the next 2 years. Your neighbor decides they need to sell their piece of land right away, or in the time it takes you to build, maybe 3 more pieces of land come up because we have an economic downturn. And you go, oh, now I know exactly where we can template the next 2 or 3 of these homes, and you can move quickly because of the access to cash. So,
I mean, you bring up an interesting perspective, because we were thinking to be less risk averse. And Kevin, you might disagree with me, but to be less risk averse, it's how much have you paid off on your mortgage? How much do you not owe? Instead of having the extra cash set aside beside your nest egg. But that makes sense. And, certain situations you want to have access to cash fast. And I suppose with the real estate, I know it's an investment property for our second, the vacation home, but I was still thinking about it as your primary mortgage of, okay, every interest payment you pay is, you're not getting anything back on that. So you just want to pay it off.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is, food for thought. And Kevin, you've probably already, might have thought about this, but for me, it's new.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad that it's helpful. Guys, please do not hesitate to reach out if anything else bubbles up, or if you throw all this into a spreadsheet and want to just test your assumptions, send it on back to me. I love that you guys got a chance to enjoy the episode that we did on you in your article in the Wall Street Journal. And, we hope that this will keep being helpful, this podcast. In fact, we did one not long ago on the different ways to buy a home that deals with return on equity versus return on investment, 15 versus 30-year mortgages. And I'll just send you those 2 episodes, and hopefully they kind of contribute to what we talked about today.
Yeah, and I think, our other question today, and I know we're ending, but is the, is it better to do the cash out refinance just on our primary home so we don't have a construction loan? Because I know there's additional fees and costs with the construction loan that we could potentially avoid if we do that. So that's something else that we, we're looking into.
Yeah, and I noticed from your note that you'd sent me, Jennifer, as you guys are digging in now, rental studies, meeting with general contractors, getting some of those facts gathered in, because once you have all those facts, what I want you guys to do is not take my opinion. Don't take my opinion on, using $100,000 of leverage instead of using $100,000 of cash. Just consider it, test it. That's it. So same with this, you're going to test, what does it cost with the rental studies? What does it look like if it's one nicer home or a duplex? All of that stuff. And then we could totally dig back in on the difference between doing cash out refi because it's primary residence, which then means, and this is key, if you do that, you need to work with your CPA to make sure they allocate a portion of the interest as, and this would be good to write down, investment interest expense. Because your home mortgage can usually only be deducted as $100,000 above your original acquisition indebtedness. So if you did much more of a cash out refi to get the more beneficial interest rates of a primary residence, which I'm 100% behind, and I know Corey would be too, but you just got to make sure you can still deduct it. But now you're going to deduct it not only against your income, a portion of it will be against your income like a regular mortgage payment, and your CPA will carve out the other chunk to make sure it can be deducted against the profit from where you invested it in the rental property.
Okay.
Cool. Well, it's so good having you guys today. Again, I look forward to chatting with you guys sometime again in the future. I know on behalf of our audience and Corey, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show this morning, and a little bit of our technical difficulties before we went on air, but I'm glad you guys stuck it out. And Kevin, thank you so much for coming up with the solution we used today. So look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
This was fun. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
Paul.
care.